June 7, 1944. 0620 hours. Omaha Beach, Normandy, France. Salt spray stings your eyes as you wade through waist-deep water turned crimson at the edges, the morning mist barely concealing the carnage of yesterday's assault. Major Frank Hayes, 5th Engineer Special Brigade, plants his boots on French soil and surveys what remains of Hitler's Atlantic Wall, concrete teeth shattered, wire tangled like dead brambles, and everywhere the debris of battle, helmets, rifles, bodies waiting for graves registration. But Hayes isn't looking at the dead. He's scanning the beach for something else, something the brass back in England promised would arrive within hours of the initial assault. Behind him, Liberty ships bob in the gray Channel waters, their holds packed with ammunition, rations, fuel, and the thousands of tons of material needed to sustain the largest amphibious invasion in human history. The problem? No port. Cherbourg lies 20 miles north, still firmly in German hands. The invasion planners knew this would happen, knew the Wehrmacht would defend or destroy every harbor along the French coast. Hayes lights a lucky strike with trembling fingers, not from fear, but exhaustion. He hasn't slept in 36 hours. Around him, combat engineers from the 1st Infantry Division are clearing mines, dragging Belgian gates aside, marking safe lanes with white tape that snaps in the offshore wind. LSTS, landing ship, tank, grind onto the sand, their bow doors dropping with metallic screams to disgorge Shermans, half-tracks, jeeps, each vehicle racing inland before the next tide. "Major!" Sergeant Bill Kowalski slogs up, his uniform caked with wet sand. "We've got a problem with the tidal flow. The DUKWs are getting swamped trying to unload the heavier equipment." Hayes nods. He expected this. Everyone expected this. Without a deep-water port, the Allies are attempting something never done before, supplying an entire field army directly over open beaches. The numbers are staggering. General Bradley's First Army needs 14,000 tons of supplies daily. Right now, the beaches are barely managing 6,000 tons, and that's in good weather. 10 miles offshore, aboard the headquarters ship USS Achernar, Rear Admiral John Wilkes studies tide charts and meteorological reports with the intensity of a man playing poker with the Atlantic Ocean itself. He knows what's coming. Locked in the wardroom safe are the complete plans for Operation Mulberry, the construction of 2 massive artificial harbors that will make or break the Normandy campaign. "The first convoy departed Selseyville 4 hours ago," his aide reports. "Phoenix units, bombardons, and the first of the whale bridging." Wilkes grunts acknowledgement. Phoenix units, massive concrete caissons, each 5 stories tall and weighing 6,000 tons. The British christened them with typical understatement. He knows their true designation. Reinforced concrete structures designed to be towed across the channel and sunk in precise positions to create breakwaters where none existed before. Back on Omaha, Hayes receives the radio transmission he's been waiting for. Mulberry A is moving, ETA 12 hours. Around him, the beach has transformed from battlefield to organized chaos. Engineers have bulldozed roads through the dunes. MPs direct traffic with the urgency of men who know German artillery in the hills above can resume fire any moment. A fuel dump is taking shape behind a seawall, camouflage netting already being draped over jerry cans stacked 10 high. But it's not enough. Hayes does the math constantly, compulsively. 3 infantry divisions are pushing inland. The 2nd and 3rd Armored will arrive within days. Each Sherman tank consumes 200 gallons of fuel daily in combat. Each infantryman needs 6 pounds of supplies: food, ammunition, medical supplies, spare parts, uniforms, letters from home. Multiply that by 100,000 men, then 200,000, then 500,000. Without ports, the invasion dies. It's that simple. Logistics wins wars, not courage. And right now, the Allied beachhead is a python trying to swallow an elephant, choking on its own ambition. Hayes watches an LCVP, landing craft, vehicle, personnel, capsize in the surf, spilling crates into the foam. Sailors dive after them, but the channel swallows most. Wasted. Every lost crate is ammunition a rifleman won't have when he meets the 12th SS Panzer Division. The major crushes his cigarette and turns to Kowalski. Get the 37th Battalion deployed along Sector Dog Green. When those Phoenix units arrive, I want every man with engineering experience ready to work around the clock. We're about to attempt something that's either brilliant or insane. What's that, sir? Hayes looks at the gray horizon where, invisible beyond the curve of the Earth, the largest maritime construction project in history is beginning its slow procession toward France. We're going to build 2 ports, he says quietly, in 10 days. June 8, 1944, 1340 hours, 15 miles south of the Isle of Wight. The tugboat HMS Eminent strains against her tow line, diesel engines hammering as she drags Phoenix Caisson A7 through swells that crash against the concrete monolith like artillery fire. Lieutenant Commander David Thompson grips the bridge rail, watching the massive structure wallow behind his vessel like a dying whale. She's listing 2 degrees to port, his first officer reports. Adjust ballast, and get me a confirmation from Resolve and Adherent. I want to know if their units are holding formation. This is the nightmare scenario Thompson trained for, but never quite believed would happen. Towing a 6,000-ton concrete box across one of the most treacherous bodies of water on Earth, in a convoy of 132 similar structures, while U-boats prowl beneath and the Luftwaffe might appear overhead at any moment. The Phoenix units are only part of the armada. Stretched across miles of channel water, the Mulberry convoy includes bombardon floating breakwaters, cruciform steel giants 200 feet long, designed to float and absorb wave energy, whale pontoon bridging sections, spud pierheads equipped with legs that will anchor them to the seabed, and the transport ships carrying thousands of tons of bridging equipment, anchors, cables, and the specialized tools needed to assemble 2 complete harbors under combat conditions. Thompson thinks about the engineering audacity required to conceive this plan. In August 1943, just 10 months ago, British engineers presented Winston Churchill with a proposal: build portable harbors in England, tow them to France, and sink them in predetermined positions to create protected anchorage for supply ships. Churchill allegedly scrawled in the margin, "They must float up and down with the tide. Don't argue the matter. The difficulties will argue for themselves. The difficulties are arguing now." Phoenix A7 wasn't designed for beauty or efficiency. It was designed to be built quickly, floated out, and sunk in exactly the right spot. Its hull is a warren of ballast chambers that can be flooded to control buoyancy. Once positioned off the Normandy coast, seacocks will open, allowing seawater to pour in until the caisson settles on the seafloor, with its concrete walls rising above the waterline, creating an artificial breakwater. "Signal from Commodore Hoare," the radio operator calls out. "All Phoenix units maintaining formation, ETA Normandy coast, 0900 hours tomorrow." Thompson nods. Tomorrow. By tomorrow morning, this wallowing collection of concrete and steel needs to be precisely positioned off Omaha Beach to create Mulberry Harbor A, the American harbor. 6 miles east, an identical operation will construct Mulberry B off Gold Beach for the British. Below decks on the headquarters ship HMS Dispatch, Colonel William Everett studies blueprints under harsh electric light. As chief engineer for Mulberry A, everything depends on mathematical precision. The Phoenix caissons must be sunk in a precise arc, creating a breakwater 6,000 feet long. Inside this protective barrier, the bombardon units will absorb residual wave action. Then come the pierheads, floating platforms anchored by steel legs driven into the seabed, rising and falling with the tide, but always maintaining level surfaces for unloading ships. The genius of the design is the whale bridging, flexible steel roadways that connect the pierheads to the beach, articulated to move with tidal changes of up to 20 feet. Liberty ships will tie up to the pierheads, unload directly onto the whale spans, and trucks will drive the cargo straight onto French soil without ever touching a landing craft. "If it works," Everett mutters to himself. His assistant, Captain Raymond Parks, looks up from a logistics chart. "Sir?" "Nothing. How many tons per day are we projecting once both harbors are operational?" The estimates say 7,000 tons daily through Mulberry A alone. Combined with beach landings and Mulberry B, we should hit 18,000 tons within a week. 18,000 tons. Enough to keep the breakout going. Enough to prevent the beachhead from becoming another Anzio or Gallipoli. Bloody stalemates where insufficient supply strangled offensive capability. But first, they have to survive the crossing and the installation. Thompson feels it before he sees it. A change in the channel's mood. The wind shifts northeast, temperature dropping. Swells grow from 3 feet to 5, then 6. Phoenix A7 pitches heavily, seawater sloshing inside her ballast chambers with sounds like distant thunder. Bridge, engine room, we're redlining to maintain speed. Hold course, Thompson orders. We're not stopping now. Around him, across miles of gray water, the armada labors forward. Tugboats belch black smoke. Phoenix units grind through the waves. Bombardons surge and dive. It looks less like a naval operation than a migration of prehistoric beasts. On the Normandy coast, Hayes and his engineers have cleared a section of beach and installed the first survey markers, precise coordinates where each Phoenix unit must settle. One miscalculation, one caisson even 50 feet out of position, and the entire harbor geometry fails. Thompson checks his chronometer. 20 hours until they reach French waters. 20 hours to tow 6,000 tons of concrete through enemy territory during the largest invasion in history. He lights his pipe, tastes salt spray and tobacco, and watches Phoenix A7 climb another swell. The future of the war wallows behind him in the gray Atlantic dawn. June 9, 1944. 0847 hours. 1 mile offshore from Omaha Beach. The USS LST-342 cuts engines, and in the sudden quiet, you can hear the war inland. Artillery rumbling like distant storms. The occasional crackle of small arms fire from the hedgerows beyond the coastal plain. But here, in the shallow waters off France, a different kind of battle is beginning. First Phoenix unit approaching, spotters call from the beach. Hayes stands in knee-deep water with a surveying team, watching HMS Eminent and her monstrous cargo materialize from the morning haze. Phoenix A1 rides low in the water, her concrete flanks streaked with salt and rust stains, her ballast chambers keeping her barely afloat. She needs to be positioned exactly 1,200 yards offshore, oriented at bearing 187 degrees magnetic, aligned with Phoenix A2, which will arrive 30 minutes behind her. All units, stand by for position, Hayes transmits. The tugboats maneuver with painful slowness, fighting current and wind to nudge the massive caisson into position. On Phoenix A1's deck, Royal Navy divers prepare to open the seacocks that will flood her ballast chambers and send her to the bottom. But not yet. Not until surveying confirms she's exactly where she needs to be. Hayes peers through the theodolite, calculating angles with the intensity of an astronomer tracking planets. Bearing 189 degrees, she needs to come 2 degrees west. It takes 40 minutes to make the adjustment. 40 minutes of tugboats straining, hawsers singing with tension, diesel engines roaring. Finally, position confirmed. Sink her. The divers vanish into Phoenix A1's interior. Minutes pass. Then, almost imperceptibly, the massive structure begins to settle. Water pours into her ballast chambers with the sound of waterfalls echoing inside concrete canyons. She drops 6 feet, 12, 18. Seawater boils around her flanks. Then, with a shudder that ripples across the surface, Phoenix A1 grounds on the channel floor, her upper third still rising above the waterline. A newborn island, conjured from British concrete and American desperation. A1 is down, Hayes reports. Bring in A2. The ballet repeats. By sunset, 7 Phoenix units form a rough arc 800 yards offshore, their concrete walls creating the skeleton of a breakwater. Between them, engineers will later sink older ships, block ships, to fill the gaps. But that's tomorrow's work. Tonight, Kowalski and his team are wrestling with the bombardons, the floating breakwaters that will go inside the Phoenix Ark to calm the inner harbor. Each bombardon is a cruciform steel structure weighing 1,600 tons, anchored by cables to concrete blocks on the seafloor. The concept is simple. The bombardons float on the surface, absorbing wave energy before it reaches the inner anchorage. The execution is hellish. "Cable's fouled!" a sailor shouts as bombardon B4 swings wildly in the current, threatening to smash against Phoenix A3. Engineers dive into water so cold it stops your breath, untangling steel cables thick as a man's arm, fighting the tide while above them the war continues. A Luftwaffe reconnaissance plane drones overhead, too high for the AA guns to reach, photographing this strange maritime construction site. Hayes watches it pass and wonders what German intelligence will make of these concrete monoliths rising from the sea. June 12, 1944. 10:15 hours. The first whale pierhead is being positioned. These are the crown jewels of the Mulberry system. Floating steel platforms, 200 feet long, supported by telescoping legs that extend to the seafloor. The legs allow the platform to rise and fall with the 20-foot Norman tides while maintaining a level surface for unloading. Captain Raymond Parks oversees the delicate operation of lowering the pierhead's 4 massive steel legs. Each leg weighs 30 tons and must be positioned with absolute precision. Hydraulic pumps groan, chains rattle. The first leg extends downward 50 feet, 60, 70, until it hits sand and bedrock. Leg 1 secure, engineers report. Extending leg 2. It takes 6 hours to anchor 1 pierhead. They need 5. But the system is working. Around the Phoenix breakwater, the water is noticeably calmer. Small landing craft that would have been swamped in open channel waters now ride easily in the protected anchorage. The first Liberty ship, SS James Marshall, eases through the breakwater gap, her holds packed with artillery shells and medical supplies. "She's the test," Colonel Everett tells Parks. "If Marshall can tie up to Pierhead Alpha and unload, we prove the concept." The Liberty ship approaches the floating pierhead with agonizing slowness. Her captain is attempting something no merchant marine officer has ever done: dock at a pier that doesn't exist on any chart, in a harbor built in less than a week, while German artillery might begin ranging fire at any moment. Hawsers fly across the gap. Sailors secure them. SS James Marshall's hull kisses the pierhead with a hollow boom that echoes across the water. Then she's fast, and her cargo booms are swinging out, and the first pallets of supplies are descending onto the whale bridge that now connects the pierhead to the beach. "Gentlemen," Everett says quietly, "we have a harbor." June 14th, 1944. The 10th day since D-Day. Both Mulberry Harbours are operational. Mulberry A off Omaha Beach stretches across 2 miles of ocean, a city of steel and concrete conjured from nothing. Phoenix caissons form the outer breakwater. Bombardons float in precise rows. 5 pierheads rise and fall with the tide, their whale bridges flexing like living things. And everywhere, ships, Liberty ships, Victory ships, coasters and tankers. An endless procession of vessels queuing to enter the artificial harbors, unload their precious cargo, and race back to England for more. Hayes stands on the completed whale bridge, feeling it flex beneath his boots as the tide changes. Trucks rumble past him. Jimmies loaded with ammunition, gasoline, spare parts, rations. Overhead, cargo nets swing from Liberty ship holds, guided by crane operators who haven't slept in days. The numbers are staggering. In 10 days, the Allies have constructed 2 harbors larger than Dover, capable of handling ships up to 10,000 tons. Mulberry A alone is processing 6,000 tons of supplies daily, and that number is climbing. Kowalski approaches, grinning despite exhaustion. "Sir, you should see what the Navy boys are saying. They're calling it the eighth wonder of the world." Hayes lights a cigarette and watches another Liberty ship ease into the anchorage. Let's hope the Germans agree. 15 miles inland, they already do. June 15th, 1944. 13:20 hours, Chateau de la Roche-Guyon, headquarters of Army Group B, 60 kilometers northeast of the invasion beaches. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel stands at the chateau's medieval windows, studying reconnaissance photographs with the focus of a surgeon examining terminal X-rays. Behind him, intelligence officers wait in silence, afraid to interrupt the Desert Fox's thoughts. The photographs show something that shouldn't exist. Massive concrete structures rising from the sea, floating piers extending to the beach, and an endless procession of ships, dozens of ships, unloading in waters that should be far too exposed for sustained operations. "How long?" Rommel asks quietly. Major Wilhelm Hartmann, intelligence staff, clears his throat. 10 days, Herr Feldmarschall. Our reconnaissance aircraft first observed construction activities on June 7th. By June 14th, both harbors were operational. 10 days. Rommel repeats it like a death sentence. He sets down the photographs and turns to face his staff. At 52, his face is lined with exhaustion and something else. The terrible clarity of a professional soldier recognizing checkmate. "Show me the tonnage estimates." Hartmann shuffles papers with trembling hands. The Americans' Mulberry A is estimated at 6,000 tons daily. The British harbor at Arromanches is slightly larger, perhaps 7,000 tons. Combined with direct beach landings, the Allies are now receiving approximately 18,000 tons of supplies per day. This number appears to be increasing. 18,000 tons. Rommel does the mathematics automatically. The arithmetic of modern warfare that consumes fuel, shells, and lives with industrial efficiency. The entire Wehrmacht's supply network in Normandy struggles to deliver 15,000 tons daily to defend against the invasion, and that's with rail lines, highways, and established ports. The Allies are matching German logistics while landing on hostile beaches. General der Artillerie Erich Marx enters the chateau's war room, leaning heavily on his cane. The left leg was lost in Russia, like so many things. "Erwin, you've seen the photographs?" "I've seen them." Rommel gestures to the wall map where pins and ribbons mark the front lines. The Allied beachhead has expanded relentlessly. Cherbourg is nearly surrounded. The Bocage country is being contested hedgerow by bloody hedgerow, but the Allies keep coming, keep attacking, never seeming to run short of ammunition or fuel, or the 1,000 other supplies that modern armies devour. "They've solved the port problem," Marx says flatly. "Everything we planned, destroying Le Havre, fortifying Cherbourg, mining every harbor from Calais to Brest, meaningless. They simply built their own ports." Rommel returns to the window. From this medieval chateau where French kings once hunted, he can't see the invasion beaches, but he can imagine them. The artificial harbors working around the clock, immune to sabotage because they didn't exist a week ago. Impossible to shell because they're protected by overwhelming naval artillery and air superiority. "The Führer still believes we can drive them into the sea," an aide ventures carefully. "The Führer," Rommel says with sudden venom, "is in Berchtesgaden, playing with architectural models while France burns." He catches himself, aware that such words are treasonous. But the men in this room have followed him from Africa to France, and Understand that loyalty to Germany and loyalty to Hitler are no longer the same thing. He picks up another photograph, this one showing an overhead view of Mulberry B, the British harbor. You can see the Phoenix caissons clearly, massive concrete blocks arranged in a precise arc. Inside the breakwater, pierheads cluster like the piers of London or Liverpool. Except these piers didn't take decades to build. They materialized in 10 days through an engineering effort Rommel can only respect with professional awe. So, during the planning for Atlantic Wall construction, Rommel says to no one in particular, I requested 15,000 additional steel obstacles for the beaches. I was given 3,000. I requested 50 more divisions to defend France. I received promises. The Allies decided they needed 2 harbors that didn't exist, so they built them in 10 days while under fire. The silence in the room is absolute. Marx breaks it. Can we destroy them? Air attack? E-boats? Long-range artillery? Hartmann shakes his head. The Luftwaffe can barely contest French airspace. What's left of our naval forces can't approach without being annihilated by Allied destroyers. As for artillery, Herr General, the harbors are at sea, protected by naval bombardment that can level any gun position we establish. So we watch, Rommel says, while they build up strength for the breakout. 3 weeks, perhaps 4, and they'll have 20 divisions fully supplied and mobile. Then they'll punch through at Avranches or Saint-Lô, and there won't be enough of us left to stop them. He's thinking of Africa now, of the long-range desert group and Malta convoys, of fighting a war where British intelligence read German codes and Allied logistics always delivered more tanks, more planes, more fuel than the Afrika Korps could match. He's thinking of the inevitable mathematics of industrial warfare, America's factories against Germany's crumbling production, Soviet manpower against Wehrmacht divisions bleeding white in Russia, and now these impossible harbors pouring supplies onto French soil faster than the Reich can respond. Gentlemen, Rommel says with terrible finality, the war in the West is lost. These harbors prove it. The only question now is how many good men will sacrifice before the politicians accept reality. An aide gasps at the frankness. Marx just nods slowly. Outside the chateau windows, a summer storm is building over the channel, dark clouds massing, wind rising. Inside, Rommel studies the invasion maps one more time. Professional habit forcing him to look for advantages that no longer exist. For the miracle counterattack that would require divisions he doesn't have, fuel that won't arrive, and air support that vanished somewhere over the Ruhr. The photographs of the Mulberry Harbours lie on his desk like evidence at a trial. 10 days, he thinks again. The Allies built complete harbors in 10 days. The verdict is already in. June 19th, 1944. 04:15 hours. Mulberry A, off Omaha Beach. Hayes is awakened by movement, his cot in the shore command post tilting as wind slams into the canvas tent with the force of artillery. He's on his feet instantly, training overriding exhaustion, and pushes through the tent flap into chaos. The storm arrived without warning during the night. Channel winds scream at 40 knots, driving rain horizontally across the beach. The sea has transformed from steel gray to boiling black, waves 20 feet high, hammering the Mulberry Harbor with apocalyptic fury. Even with the Phoenix breakwater, the protected anchorage is becoming a maelstrom. "Status!" Hayes shouts into the wind. Kowalski appears from the darkness, drenched. 3 bombardons have broken their moorings. The whale bridges are taking massive strain. We've got structural failure on Pierhead Charlie. Hayes runs toward the water. What he sees stops him cold. The harbor they built in 10 days is being torn apart by forces no engineering can withstand. Bombardon sections, each weighing 1,600 tons, have broken loose and are slamming against the Phoenix caissons like battering rams. The whale bridges, flexible steel roadways designed to move with the tide, are flexing beyond their tolerances, some spans twisted into abstract sculptures of tortured metal. "Get all vessels out of the anchorage," he orders. "Now, before they're driven onto the pierheads." For 3 days the storm rages. It's the worst channel weather in 40 years, a freak meteorological event that Eisenhower's weather officers failed to predict. The Great Storm of June 1944 will be analyzed and debated for decades. But right now, Hayes and his engineers can only watch their creation being devoured by the sea. Mulberry A suffers catastrophic damage. Pierhead Charlie collapses when a loose bombardon smashes its support legs. 2 Phoenix caissons crack under the relentless pounding. Most of the whale bridging is destroyed. By June 22nd, when the storm finally passes, Mulberry A is operational at only 30% capacity, still useful for small craft, but unable to handle Liberty ships. Hayes stands in the wreckage, exhausted beyond words. Around him, engineers are already assessing damage, planning repairs, but he knows the truth. Mulberry A will never fully recover. 6 miles east, however, Mulberry B tells a different story. June 23, 1944, 1100 hours. Arromanches, Gold Beach sector. The British harbor survived. Better positioned in the lee of the Normandy coast, protected by different tidal patterns and seafloor geology, Mulberry B weathered the storm with moderate damage. Within 24 hours of the storm's end, Liberty ships are once again tying up to the pierheads and supplies are flowing. But something remarkable happens next. The Allied Logistics Command makes a decision that demonstrates the industrial might and flexibility that Rommel feared. They'll repair what can be salvaged from Mulberry A and use those components to expand Mulberry B. The American harbor becomes a parts depot for the British one, and instead of 2 medium harbors, the Allies will operate 1 massive port capable of handling 11,000 tons daily. By early July, that's exactly what happens. Mulberry B, now simply called Port Winston after Churchill, becomes the 2nd busiest port in Europe, exceeded only by Marseille. Every day, dozens of ships queue to enter the artificial harbor. Every day, thousands of tons of supplies pour across the whale bridges onto French soil. Colonel Everett walks those bridges in mid-July, watching a Sherman tank company rumble past, heading inland to reinforce the St. Lo offensive. The tanks are new, factory fresh from Detroit, transported across the Atlantic, unloaded at an artificial harbor that didn't exist 6 weeks ago, and now rolling toward battle. The logistics chain from American factory to French battlefield has been compressed to a time frame that would have been impossible in any previous war. "How long will it keep operating?" Captain Parks asks. Everett watches another Liberty ship ease into the anchorage. "Indefinitely. Once we take Cherbourg and clear the port, probably another week, we'll have deep water facilities. But even then, Port Winston will handle overflow. The British are talking about keeping it operational through the winter. The numbers bear this out. By late July, the Allies have landed over 1 million men in France. They've brought ashore 566,000 tons of supplies and 171,000 vehicles. The bocage fighting is brutal. Every hedgerow a fortress, every village a killing ground. But the American and British armies never run short of ammunition, never lack for fuel, never stop advancing because logistics failed. August 1st, 1944. The Cobra breakout begins. American armor smashes through German lines at Avranches, pouring into Brittany and racing toward Paris. Patton's Third Army becomes operational, its tanks fueled by gasoline that flowed through Port Winston just days earlier. The Wehrmacht, starved of supplies by Allied air superiority and partisan sabotage, fighting with divisions reduced to battle group strength, cannot match the Allied tempo. Hayes, promoted to lieutenant colonel, watches from the beaches as the invasion transitions into liberation. The shoreline that was soaked in blood on June 6th is now a logistics hub. Organized, efficient, boring in the best possible way. Trucks queue in orderly rows. MPs direct traffic. Fuel dumps stretch inland for acres. A graves registration unit has transformed what was once a German pillbox into a field office, paperwork replacing violence. "Sir," Kowalski says, approaching with a sheaf of reports. Final numbers from Port Winston operations. From June 14th through yesterday, the artificial harbor handled 628,000 tons of supplies and 40,000 vehicles. Hayes takes the report but doesn't read it. He's looking at the horizon where Phoenix caissons still mark the breakwater, concrete monoliths that will remain there for decades, slowly weathering into underwater reefs. Some of them will still be visible in the 21st century, monuments to an impossible engineering feat accomplished under impossible circumstances. "You know what the German prisoners are saying?" Kowalski continues. "The ones who saw the harbors being built. They say that's when they knew, when they saw us building ports out of nothing in 10 days. That's when they knew Germany couldn't win." Hayes thinks about Rommel and his staff studying reconnaissance photographs, calculating tonnages, doing the brutal arithmetic of modern war. He thinks about German commanders, realizing that an enemy who can build harbors in 10 days while under fire possesses resources, and that cannot be defeated. "They were right," Hayes says quietly. "We showed them what they were up against. Not just firepower, not just courage, but the ability to solve any problem, overcome any obstacle, build anything necessary to win." He watches another convoy of trucks roll inland, carrying food and ammunition and letters from home to boys fighting in the hedgerows. Overhead, a flight of P-47 Thunderbolts banks toward Germany, their bellies heavy with bombs, fueled by gasoline that crossed the Atlantic, passed through an artificial harbor, and sustained an air force that's dismantling the Reich factory by factory. The Mulberry Harbours did more than solve a logistics problem. They demonstrated to the Germans and to history that the Allies possessed not just the strength to invade Fortress Europe, but the engineering genius and industrial capacity to reshape the very ocean itself. 10 days to build a harbor. 10 days to win a war. The end.